Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk On. I'm your host, Max Chadwick. We've got another very, very special guest on with us today. It is Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, which is the premier showcase all-star game for the top college football players trying to make their way into the NFL. Jim, I really appreciate you coming on right now.
Yeah, Max, thanks for having me on.
Of course. I see behind you right now, you got Josh Allen, Justin Herbert there, two Senior Bowl alums, two obviously of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I wanted to ask you about them. I had it down in my notes. Is like, what was it like working with, some of the top quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, like Josh Allen, and, both of them coming out of college? Not a lot of people believed in them at Wyoming and Oregon, and now they transformed their games into two elite quarterbacks. Did you kind of know that, hey, these guys are getting underrated right now in the draft process?
Well, when Josh came out, that kind of predates me. I was still with the Seahawks. I remember watching Josh that week, and I had to come down and actually interview him at the hotel on Friday because our West Coast guy with the Seahawks didn't get with Josh that week, so I was covering for my guy, which I was happy to do. Josh is a really cool guy to talk to. It's been awesome to see him kind of take off and do what he's done, and then, yeah, Justin, it was really refreshing. I'll share one quick story on that one. It was late in the process. It was like late December, getting ready to be Rose Bowl time. And I got his dad's phone number from an agent and reached out to his dad. And I said, do you know much about the Senior Bowl? And he's like, no, what's that about? And I kind of told him, we're this game, college all-star game. Most of the top quarterbacks come down, and I listed off a few. And he was like, geez, Jim, that sounds neat. I'll never forget him saying that. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty neat, Mark. It's a pretty neat week. So it was great getting Justin down here, man. Like, I don't know why. To me, he was the most misevaluated quarterback we've had in a long, long time. I don't think people took into account what Justin was maybe playing with at Oregon his last year. I mean, he wasn't throwing to any NFL guys. And Penny Sewell is obviously a great player, but they weren't great up front, at least as much as they were hyped out to be. They were hyped to be like the greatest offensive line in college football that year. And that wasn't the case. So no. And Justin, I think what he had to prove down here was just, kind of not prove, but just show everyone what kind of person he was, what kind of leader he was, how he connected with people. And we put him in a lot of different situations during the week, whether it be like up in front of 15,000 people at a concert or when we had this players only party. He did some things there, and man, he just aced it through the week. He's the biggest thing about him, and like any leader, like he's true to himself. Justin's really comfortable in his own skin, and I think over the course of the week, all the players kind of saw that.
I love that. Yeah, I agree with you. He's kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole in that Oregon system too, where he's throwing so many horizontal throws. There's like, dude, just let this guy air it out with the arm that he's got. But yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. So Mark Herbert, his dad, was he kind of like, all right, we'll let him play in this game, just like, you convinced me after that one conversation.
Yeah, it's just, he's like, well, let's get through the Rose Bowl and figure this thing out. But I'll say this too, like Mark reached out after the Senior Bowl, as did Justin, to thank me for the opportunity to come down here and show himself, which, I mean, I don't ever expect that, first of all. And it doesn't happen all that often. So for a player of Justin's, caliber to, be so grateful to have, to just show appreciation for what the Senior Bowl did for him. It just speaks to the family and how Justin was raised. I mean, I'm a fan for life, man. I'm a huge Justin Herbert guy now.
I love that. So you mentioned before how you work with the Seahawks. I wanted to ask you about that too. Like, what was the difference, do you think, the biggest difference working as an NFL scout to now working for the Reese's Senior Bowl?
Man, there's a lot of differences. This is a much different job. I'll say this too, like, I feel like when you work in the NFL, like that's really scouting, because I think I see scouting as like all encompassing. It's like the lifestyle. It's being on the road 200 nights a year. It's, just being away from your family and the sacrifice, which is a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, that's why I went after this job when it became available. This was a family decision for me. My son was getting ready to play high school sports, and I didn't want to miss any of that. And so I feel like, what the rest of us do, including myself, like we're evaluators. Like we watch tape and everyone writes the reports and talks about them. But unless you're on the road, like living that grind and sacrificing and doing all that stuff, I think that's scouting. I think what everyone else does is evaluating.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that too. Like, there's so many kids and so many people I think that want to become NFL scouts, and I don't want to like dissuade them, obviously. But would you say it's maybe not as glamorous as the job maybe seems evaluating players every single day?
No, it's certainly not, man. There's you gotta love it. I mean, I
Yeah.
just I remember being on planes and watching tape on planes, and inevitably you'd be sitting next to someone and they would ask you, hey, what do you do? What are you doing? Are you a recruiter? And you'd have to explain to them, what an NFL scout does, and they're like, oh, do you love that? And I was like, yeah, I love it, because if you didn't love it, it's too hard. It's too hard of a lifestyle. Not that there's not other hard jobs out there. There's certainly a ton, and one's even harder than scouting. But I think just the sacrifice piece, and being away from home in what that can do to a family, it's really difficult. It's really challenging. And so, yeah, I never want to dissuade anyone either. We have our scout school here every year, and we bring in former NFL players for it. And I tell those guys, like, if you didn't love the film room when you played, this probably isn't for you either. So it's a great profession. I love it. But it's certainly not easy.
Absolutely. So do you have any like favorite Senior Bowl scouting stories of maybe like guys that you were watching, man, I know this guy's maybe going to go in the 4th, 5th round, but I think this guy's a lot better than that, and it ended up being a great player in the NFL. Do you have any guys that you look back on now and it's like, yeah, we really nailed that one when we brought him in for the Senior Bowl?
I mean, I don't know, man. This is such a collaborative process too. Like, we include the NFL at the end of our evaluations, and really try to have a formal process with the teams and try to bring the guys they want to see here. Because again, the rosters are for them, they're not for us. I would probably say the biggest one, and maybe the only one where I really went against the grain of what the NFL had, was Quinn Miners, the offensive lineman from Wisconsin Whitewater. And those small school evaluations are always really tricky. Obviously, they need to dominate their level of competition. You got to put on the tape, and the guy has to stick out like a sore thumb, which Quinn did. But what made his evaluation even a little more difficult was they canceled the year that year because of COVID. So now you've got a Division III player who's going to sit out an entire year, be out of pads for about 15 months, and then come to Mobile and strap it on against, SEC, Big Ten players, early round draft picks. So, the biggest thing for him, and I give a lot of credit to his agent that year. He was training in Dallas with Rashawn Slater, who had opted out of Northwestern. And over the course of the fall, he kept sending me videos of those two guys working out side by side. And really, one of the things with Quinn, and we joked about it when he got here, was that he was pretty sloppy his last year on Whitewater tape. Really kind of top heavy. And yes, he got famous, for the gut hanging out of his jersey here in Mobile. But I'm telling you, man, it was worse. It was worse the year before. So you started to see his body tighten up and him getting more fit. And then you just watch the drill work, and you watch the initial quickness, and the change of direction skills and the flexibility. I mean, all that stuff, it wasn't that far off from Rashawn. And Rashawn that year was our highest graded offensive lineman. We had him 1 and Penei Sewell 2. So I was like, wow, man, this is pretty close. But then when we vetted him out with the teams, I mean, most everyone had priority free agent grades on him. A couple of teams had late round grades. But again, that's what I mean, it takes a lot for a D3 player to get a draftable grade. I want to say the only draftable grade I gave in my 20 years in the league was Pierre Garcon from Mount Union, the receiver, who ended up being a really good player. But you know what? Usually we don't dip down into, 6th, 7th PFA level for our roster. But that year I just like, this kid needs a chance. And the teams need to see this guy. The teams need to see this guy against better competition. So obviously Quinn came down here and did a ridiculous job. He snapped for the first time in his life in a competitive environment down here in Mobile, which is a lot more difficult than most people realize. And he goes, long story short, he goes in the 3rd round at Denver, and he's a really good player for those guys. So that's probably the one that sticks out the most, of where we kind of went against the league grades.
I love that. And one of the coolest things I think about the Senior Bowl is that seemingly every year you guys bring in a small school guy, like an FCS guy, Division II guy, maybe even Division III guy. Do you kind of pride yourself on, the Senior Bowl being that platform for the players that maybe NFL teams had no idea who they were before, like Quinn Miners, but now, you bring them into this huge national spotlight, and, they can show what they got?
Well, the league knows. I mean, that's how we get on those guys, and
Mhm.
our buddies in the NFL are the ones that tell us about those guys. So we never surprise anyone. I mean, the NFL never gets surprised by anyone. Um, so no, it's always been a great showcase, man. For forever. I mean, this has always been a great platform for small school guys going all the way to like Michael Strahan coming out of Texas Southern and Walter Payton coming out of Jackson State. So we're going back decades now. But that's kind of the scary thing with the portal now. And I hope it doesn't happen, but we even saw it last year, as early as last year. I mean, our small school numbers are getting cut into. And I think the key thing when you're at the Senior Bowl is not just bringing a bunch of small school guys; it's bringing the right small school guys, because what can happen if they're not ready. I think the biggest thing with small school guys is the confidence component of it. And if they're not, there's a lot of apprehension during the week for all of our players. So if they're not wired right, if they don't have the confidence to come down here and go toe to toe with the guys from the Power 5 programs, it can be a tough week. So it's just identifying the right ones. The league wants to see certain guys against a better caliber of player, but you can't just load up with a bunch of small school guys. You still got to bring the best ones.
Absolutely. And I know, obviously, you already have probably a list of 2024 guys that you're eyeing already. How do you guys even begin that process of identifying the players that, hey, these are the guys that we might want to bring down to Mobile when it comes to the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, we started the process really probably around New Year's last year. Once we got our roster pretty much set, we'll lose guys in January. Like we lost Devin Witherspoon this year after Daniel Jeremiah put him as the number 5 pick in the draft. Thanks, DJ, for that one. But so we lose guys, but it's mostly set. So at that point, then we start working a year ahead. And really what we do, shout out to Our Lads. We just go on the Our Lads 2 deeps and we start there. And if you're starting with a Power 5 2 deep, you're really not going to miss anyone. And then we work down, group of 5. And really for the small school players, a lot of that is we just scour like all conference teams, all American lists, things of that nature. And then word of mouth stuff from guys in the league that might hear stuff. So that's kind of the process. What makes it hard right now is the portal. We'll be watching guys in the spring, and then something will happen during spring ball where they don't feel like they're getting the reps, or they're getting beat out by a freshman or whatever, an early enrollee guy, and then they're off to a new school, and we got to figure out where that guy ends up. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how we start the process.
I love that. As someone who uses RLAD, I think every single day to look at those depth charts, I can attest to that and how valuable they are in evaluating college football players. But obviously, as a scout and as now the director of the Senior Bowl, you have to have like really good relationships with college football programs. Like, how are you able to develop those relationships with those programs? That way they can, trust you and say, hey, these are the guys that we think you guys should be bringing into the Senior Bowl. Like, how do you have to develop those relationships, let's just say, for these for those FBS Power 5 programs like that?
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to my time in college football and scouting college players as well as in the NFL. I mean, it would be really hard to drop someone into like an all-star role if they hadn't been on the road and connecting with college coaches. So, and again, the nice thing now is, and we're going back, I got into it in 2000, 2001. A lot of the young guys that I came in with are like head coaches now. I just saw Shane Beamer the other day. Over the SEC media days, and Shane and I were kind of getting into the profession at the same time. So now a lot of those guys have elevated. Like Matt Rule. When I first met Matt Rule, he was a GA at UCLA, and I was a first-year West Coast scout for the Patriots. So, those relationships just go back, and then you have to work at them, obviously. And we do that as well. It's just staying in contact with these guys, and that's it. It's the name of the game.
I love that. So, going back a couple of years now at the Senior Bowl, you guys, it seemed to be in the 2022 quarterback class. It seemed to be a weaker quarterback class, but yet here we are, and a bunch of guys are going to get a shot to start this year. You guys had Kenny Pickett there, Desmond Ritter as well. Like, how excited are you to see, year 2 for Kenny Pickett as a starter, and then maybe the Desmond Ritter, and Sam Howell too is going to start probably in Washington this year. How excited are you to see those 3 guys, Senior Bowl alums like that?
Yeah, it's year 2 is always fun. It's everyone talks about that jump from year 1 to year 2. So we're excited to see all those guys. And Kenny did some really good things last year. You can throw Bailey Zappi in that mix. I mean, yep. Bailey, when he got on the field last year, he came down and played in our charity golf tournament last month. And I was looking through his bio. Bailey did something ridiculous. Like he's the first quarterback of the draft era or something ridiculous, where he went 2-0 in his first 2 career starts with a quarterback rating over 125. So, but really, Dez is the guy I'm excited to see this year. Talking to the guys in Atlanta, they're fired up about what this could look like this year. I was always a big believer in Dez's ability, and I think they did a really nice job this offseason with, like, obviously Bijan is a big one, but I think they added a lot of other nice pieces around Dez. So we'll see. But yeah, it's always fun, man. There should be a big jump for all these guys.
I love that. So, now going to the 2023 class, was there a player that went to the Senior Bowl that you felt was extremely underdrafted? Like you were really impressed by what he did in Mobile, really impressed by his college tape, and he went a lot lower than you would have picked him in the draft. Was there anyone from that 2023 Senior Bowl class that you say, man, I would have pounded the table for that guy and wanted him to go a lot higher?
Oh, I would probably say Kenny McIntosh from Georgia. He's the guy for us. He was our highest graded running back last year. And again, we're wrong too. So it's not like we have all the answers, but we're getting, on day 3 of the draft. I shot a text to John Schneider in Seattle. And I'm not saying this is why they picked him. It's obviously not. They do all their own work and their scouting staff is ridiculous. But I was just like, what's the deal with McIntosh? I said, we had Zach Charbonnet, who they took in the second round, was our number 2 graded running back, and Kenny was our number 1. And Kenny didn't have a great combine. He ran low 4.6s. Some of the other testing stuff wasn't great. But to me, you just got to keep going back to the tape. And he looked explosive on tape. And he was, really a guy that they detached a bunch they used in the pass game, dynamic runner. So, yeah, to get Kenny McIntosh in the 7th round was ridiculous. And then to see, I don't know, Max, if you saw that call that Kenny had with the Seattle media where he was like breaking down in tears and was, now you're getting a Kenny McIntosh with a giant chip on his shoulder. Look out for Seattle running the football. That's what Coach Carroll wants to be. He wants to be a run-first team. But now with Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, holy cow, that's going to be that's a fun backfield.
Yeah, I also loved Kenny McIntosh's tape, at Georgia. And then obviously I thought he played great at the Senior Bowl too. And so, yeah, that was another guy that I could not believe was there in the 7th round. You mentioned, having these relationships with these players. Do you have any funny behind the scenes stories of some of the guys that you're able to work with at the Senior Bowl?
Funny behind the scenes stuff. There's always a ton of fun, during the week. That's the fun part in this job as opposed to being a scout. You're coming down here and you're just grabbing players and trying to interview them. Whereas in this role, you can see them more behind the scenes and just see the relationships kind of develop behind the scenes, which is really cool. I want to say like my 2nd or 3rd year, we had a couple linemen. I'm a Michigan grad, so we had to get Ben Bredesen in the game. And that same year, we had Jonah Jackson from Ohio State. And after the game, I come back down to the team hotel, and the guys are all getting a stack. And I see Jonah, and he's wearing. I come up from behind, and there's this T-shirt, and it says Brett. It's a Michigan. It's a Navy shirt. It's got Bredesen in Mays on the back of his shirt. And I tap him, and I think it's Bredesen. He turns around, it's Jonah Jackson. I'm like, what are you doing with Ben's shirt on? So there's the rivalries out the window. Those two had bonded over the course of the week that they'd already traded shirts and stuff. But yeah, man, it's so much fun. It's so much fun to connect with these players. Even just the other day on Twitter, I saw Michael Wilson, the receiver from Stanford, who I got close with during this draft cycle. His girlfriend scored 2 goals the other night for the U.S. women's soccer team. And I knew she played at Stanford. I did not know she was on the women's national team. So for her to go out and score 2 goals against Vietnam, I think in that first game, I texted him. That was really cool. Now I got to get locked into Women's World Cup here. Yeah. It's a lot of fun, man. Those relationships make it all worthwhile.
That's awesome. So obviously you mentioned before how the day-to-day grind of being a scout and work for the Senior Bowl is maybe not as glamorous. Do you have like a nightmare travel story from your time as a scout and now working with the Senior Bowl where, maybe just you missed a flight or anything like that? Can you kind of go into that nightmarish travel that you have to go through as a scout day to day?
Yeah, shoot, a week ago last Sunday, I got stranded in Atlanta Hartsfield Airport for a night trying to get to SEC Media Days. That was no fun. I've flown through there hundreds of times and never been stranded in the airport, and that happened the other night. So that wasn't any fun. Got about 20 minutes of sleep. And then on the road, there's times where blowing tires out on the road. I think that in 18 years that only happened a couple times, but I remember I was in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and blew a tire out on the highway. And it took the guys, like the road crew, like 2 hours to get to me. So yeah, there's obviously stuff like that. And then, and then hotel stuff, being at hotels and like little league baseball teams, staying at the hotel and running on your floor as you're trying to, just the normal travel stuff that everyone goes through. But yeah, there's a lot of it for sure.
I don't want to dissuade too many people from going into the business because I feel like we're talking about all the horrible parts about being a scout and working in the Senior Bowl. What do you think are the most rewarding parts, though, of not only your time as a scout, but now being the director of the Senior Bowl?
Winning, man, winning, being a part of a winning organization, and really just doing it together with a group. I think I was really lucky in my time in the NFL, going to a bunch of Super Bowls, and that's what happens when you get around quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Russell Wilson and coaches like Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll. I was really fortunate, and just worked with a bunch of great guys. Man, there's so many great guys I worked with over the years, so many great experiences, and to me, that's what we've tried to build here at the Senior Bowl as best we can. We build out a scouting staff of a bunch of former NFL players or former NFL scouts, because if this were just me sitting in an office watching tape and picking rosters, like that wouldn't be fun, Max. Like that wouldn't be rewarding. Like I like a collaborative process. Like that people ask me, do I miss working in the league? And I'd miss it a lot more if we didn't have this thing built out the way we have it, because, we have Zoom meetings. We talk about players constantly, and I'm out at games on Saturdays. I still do miss being at schools every day and reconnecting with guys, because you really become close with the whole fraternity. It's not just the guys that you work with. You honestly become closer with guys that you're scouting with in a particular area than sometimes maybe the guys you work with for the club that you're working for. So, but no, it's just the winning, man. Being a part of a winner, help build a winner, even if it's the very small, if you're the smallest part of it. To me, that's why you do it.
I love that. So obviously, I said before, I know a lot of people who say, "Oh, I want to be a scout," or I know some people say, "Oh, I really would love to work for like the Senior Bowl someday." Can you kind of go into like what a typical day of work would look like for them if they worked, say, at the Senior Bowl?
For the Senior Bowl for us, I mean, we're doing all our tape at home, so our guys are all over the country. I mean, that's the key thing for us, is just having coverage across the country, so we're not on planes, right? We're not a $1 billion franchise. If we sold the Senior Bowl, we wouldn't be selling it for $6 billion like the Washington Commanders did last week. So we got to be careful of that stuff. So, we have to have guys all around the country, and they have to be able to get to games pretty accessible, a couple hour drive, 3 or 4 hour drive at most. So they'll be at games on Saturdays, sometimes a couple games on the weekends, and watching tape all during the week. And then filing reports. We have a scouting system where they just file their reports right in, and they have boards that they can manage, like their own personal boards, and it gets fit into our master board. And then I cross-check all the guys that we have draftable grades on. So I obviously don't have the bandwidth to see every player. So that's why it's important to have experienced scouts. And then a big part of their job too, and that's why we really tap into former NFL guys, is their relationships. So guys that have, just been in it or are getting out, I mean, they've got the relationships with the schools. They got relationships with the scouting network in that part of the country. So that's how we get on, some of the small school guys, or like the late bloomers, the 1 year wonders, if you will, guys that really break out as seniors. That helps us when we're at games on Saturdays and we've got those relationships and we can have those conversations.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you some questions real quick about the 2024 class coming up right now. And you look at that quarterback class in 2024. Yes, you got Caleb Williams and Drake May, who are, rising, third-year players. But after them, man, you got Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Jordan Travis, Spencer Rattler, a bunch of guys who've been in college for a long time, and a bunch of guys who are eligible to play in the Senior Bowl. Are you guys kind of like licking your chops right now, looking at that 2024 quarterback class with all of these older quarterbacks, like Joe Milton too, that you see and say, hey, maybe those could be some guys who bring down a Mobile?
I don't know about licking our chops, man. It's a lot. I'm looking at the board right now. It's a lot of names. I'll tell you that. Like usually, realistically, there's 10 to 15 guys that have a chance every year, I think, to end up here in Mobile. And this year, that number, it looks like it's about 20 to 25 right now. So it'll be, and there's a lot to be proven. I mean, you got a lot of guys in different places. Brennan Armstrong going from Virginia to NC State, Devin Leary going from NC State to Kentucky, Sam Hartman from Wake to Notre Dame. I mean, there's Joe Milton having his first full year as a starter. What does year 2 for Bo Nix look like? And Bo's a guy we invited last year. I mean, he and Hendon Hooker were the two guys for us that made the jump from day 3 to day 2. I think at this time last year we had Bo and Hendon in the 4th. and we ended up pushing both those guys into day 2 by the end of last year. So yeah, a lot to be determined, man. It's going to be a fun class. It's going to be a fun season trying to figure those guys out.
So 2 guys, unfortunately, that aren't eligible in that quarterback class, like I mentioned before, Caleb Williams and Drake May. I know a lot of people seem to be split on them right now. Some people prefer Caleb Williams. Some people prefer Drake May. Just from your watching of them, do you have any preference between the 2 as of right now?
If I was a GM, I'd take either one of them. but no, I haven't studied either guy.
Okay.
I throw like Riley Leonard and JJ McCarthy. I mean, I probably see more of JJ than anyone, because if I am home on a weekend, we'll obviously watch Michigan and Alabama. My wife's a Bama grad, so but no, outside of watching the other guys on their offense and just seeing some of the throws, like, to me, the biggest thing with Caleb Williams that I maybe didn't appreciate is the athlete and the running ability, some of the runs that he makes. Watching, they've got a bunch of offensive linemen at USC. They got 3 guys I think we have draftable grades on right now. So yeah, just watching some of that stuff makes you appreciate. And they do jump off tape. I mean, that's the thing. And I had a couple different scouts last year call me from UNC when they were leaving Chapel Hill, leaving practice, like, dude, this kid at North Carolina is the real deal. So yeah, I know those guys are really good players, but it's hard for me to speak to them because I just haven't studied them.
No, it's completely fair. And you mentioned before how you're a Michigan grad. I'm a huge Penn State fan, like we talked about before, but I think Michigan, man, I think they're going to win the national championship this year. And I know you're yeah, I know, knock on wood for you right now, but I know you don't really want to talk about too much about the college football side of it. But do you think, man, this is the year for Jim Harbaugh that he could potentially make a run at the Natty for the Wolverines this year?
Well, there's certainly a lot of pieces, Max. And I was up there a couple summers ago, playing in Jim's golf tournament, and they just brought this new staff together, a lot of new faces. It was coming off the COVID year. They were a little bit on the hot seat, and since then, I think they've lost like 2 or 3 games. It's been unbelievable. So, as a Michigan alum, it's been fun to watch. They've really built that thing up. I mean, they've got 7 offensive linemen who are going to be on our watch list, which is crazy for one class. It's one thing to have like 7 in your program, but to have 7 in one class is different. And then obviously Blake Corum's going to be one of our highest graded running backs. I think he and Benson from Florida State are up there right now. And then Donovan Edwards is a junior. I mean, they've got at the skill positions, just looking up here, and they got Roman Wilson at wide receiver, Cornelius Johnson. So, and then they're loaded on defense. I'm just making my way to the defensive side of the ball. I saw Chris Jenkins the other day. He's a stud. So yeah, they should make a run. I mean, obviously things have to happen and things have to fall in place. But they've got a lot of good players and a lot of key places.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before the offensive line. I think that offensive line class of 2024 is honestly probably the strongest group out of anyone right now. And, a couple of guys who are eligible for the Senior Bowl, Olaf Fashanu, who's working on his master's degree right now. Graham Barton at Duke, I think, is awesome too. What are your thoughts preliminary on the 2024 offensive line class so far?
It's absolutely loaded. And now that I'm making my way through the D tackles, there's going to be some really good one-on-ones this year.
Yeah.
I can say that. I mean, I'm again just cheating right now looking over the iPad here, but there's probably 30 offensive linemen right now that I've done that I would feel more than would be really happy to have here in Mobile. Maybe more than that. Maybe there's like close to 40. So, I mean, it's a really, really strong class. Again, another position that's going to be really hard to make some final decisions on. And as I'm working my way through DTs out to the edge, I mean, that group every day, there's guys that I'm actually moving up the board from where our scouts had them graded, up into like the day 1, day 2 range. So it's going to be if you're an NFL fan and your team, if you think your team needs help on the O-line, D-line, this year's draft is going to solve that.
And I'm happy you mentioned that too, because I feel like a lot of people, when they talk about the 2024 draft, they always say, it's a heavy offensive class. Obviously, the quarterbacks are great. Offensive line's great. Got Brock Bowers at tight end, Marvin Harrison Jr. at receiver. The defensive side of the ball, they say, it's a little weaker. But I tend to think that it's not really that weak, man. I think there are great corners. There are great linebackers. The D-line, like I said, is loaded too. What are your thoughts on the defensive side of the ball in the 2024 class, here in the summer?
Like I said, I can only personally comment on the D tackles because that's where I'm through right now. But man, there's at least double the names on day 1 and day 2 than we had last year. And that's just at 1 and 3 techniques and a couple guys that could play 5. So Really strong group. Again, it thins out a little bit right now for us. It thins out a little bit at linebacker. The numbers at corner look good right now. The numbers at safety look good. But to me, like off the ball linebackers was probably the weakest position last year. At least for us. And we had a tough time, finding guys draftable. And that based off what it looks like right now, that might be the case. But certainly the D tackle class, man, this is there's been a lot of good players.
Absolutely. So a couple more questions. What are your favorite positions that you get to scout every year? Like, is there a specific position that you look at and say, man, I can't wait to watch some of the top guys from that class?
Yeah, it's a cop out, but quarterback for sure. That's what I played when I played, not real successfully, but I used to go to a bunch of camps, and I still love that position. I cross-checked wideouts for a long time in New England. We used to do position cross-checks after we got done with our areas. I like doing the wideouts. And then, man, I've really, since I've been here at the Senior Bowl, I've really enjoyed getting into offensive linemen more. Really like those guys too. That's one. If your offensive line room is messed up, like that's on you. There's too many good guys in that position group. I can't believe it on draft day every year when some of these teams take these offensive linemen that have, football character issues or personal character issues. Like there's way too many good dudes out there playing offensive line that are talented enough to help your football team. So, but I really enjoy all of them. I mean, to me, that's why I like working across the board and going position by position, because when I get kind of tired of doing one group, then we move on.
I love that. So last question I want to ask you, obviously we talked a lot about, the people that want to get into the scouting business, want to get into working for the Senior Bowl. What advice would you give those people that want to become a scout or want to work for you at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, just learn as much football as you can. It doesn't really matter what level. Get started anywhere. Even if that's like volunteering at a high school and being a position coach at the high school level. And there's so many good high school coaches out there that you can learn from. I mean, man, there's just here in the Mobile area, we're really connected to what we do here in the high school community. And there's a ton of guys coaching high school football down here that would, if they wanted to, would be really good college coaches. So yeah, just get connected and learn, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, everyone's looking for help. Even at the college level. I mean, we had a guy, share a quick story. We had someone come to the office, I want to say like my second year down here, and wanted to help out. And I just told him, man, why don't you go to South Alabama and go over there and see if they need any help? Just volunteer, man. And here we are like 4 years later, and he's the assistant DPP for an SEC school right now. And he went out there and didn't play college ball. I think he made a little bit of high school ball. And he went out to South Alabama and volunteered out there. And yeah, now he's the assistant DPP in the SEC. So it happened pretty quick for him. But, again, just be around football people, learn as best you can. And then just like any walk of life, man, it's relationships and it's network and who you get to know. So, it's kind of simple advice, but that's the best advice I'd have.
Oh, Jim, this is an awesome interview, man. I haven't been to the Senior Bowl yet, but I really want to get down to Mobile this year, so hopefully we can meet in person. But, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Max, we got to get you down, man. We got to get you here this year. But thanks for having me on, and congrats on the new gig at PFF.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.